Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Leading Through Challenges conversation series with the Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics at Duke University. We launched this series to help inspire a sense of agency and build resilience, which is something we're all striving for over these past few months and also going forward. And this series is done in partnership with Fuqua's MBA Association, Fuqua's Office of Community and Engagement and Inclusion, Duke University's Business-Oriented Women, Baldwin Scholars, the Duke Masters in Engineering Management Program, and the Duke Student Affairs. I'm Sunyin Xiang. I'm the Executive Director for the Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics, otherwise known as COLE, and we welcome you here. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis Summit, who is a second-year MBA student here. Alexis is one of our COLE Leadership Fellows. COLE Leadership Fellows are second-year MBA students who are receiving leader development to serve as coaches, mentors, and facilitators for first-year MBA students. Alexis is also co-president of the Fuqua Leads program, a special program that is furthering the leader development for our MBA students here. So without further ado, Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sanyin. And Kareem, thank you so much for being here tonight. So let me tell you a little bit about Kareem Cook. Kareem Cook is a double Dukey, and since graduating from Fuqua in 2000, he has dedicated his career to bringing healthy foods to underserved communities. It all started when he met his friend and future co-founder, Claude Tellis, at Duke University in the 90s. Kareem and Claude quickly realized that they both had the same number of aunts and uncles, 8, and most of them were living with diabetes. That was when they both agreed something had to be done to address this health crisis. Fast forward some years later, and Kareem and Claude had both graduated from business school, and they decided to move to LA. That was where they launched a vending machine company called Healthy Body Products, which supplied nutritious snacks and drinks instead of junk food and soda at LA public schools. Ultimately, they purchased NatureAid in 2012 and have grown it into a brand that Business Insider has ranked as #1 in plant-based products. Notable investors in NatureAid include Magic Johnson and other NBA stars like Grant Hill. Not only has Kareem won the Charles A. Duke Award for Outstanding Service, but he has also danced in one of Michael Jackson's shows. There is much more to this story, so I won't waste any time. We are extremely excited to have Kareem here with us today to talk about innovating by seeing possibilities instead of challenges. So let's dive right in. Kareem, could you tell us how the current pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement has affected your company and what opportunities that's created?
Yeah. So thank you for that kind introduction. I think that, let me just back up a little bit and say that the mission of our company is really to end diabetes and diet-related illnesses in underserved communities. Everyone, both my business partner and I have, 8 aunts and uncles, as you mentioned, and they all have diabetes. And for me personally, I had an aunt, my favorite aunt, my youngest aunt, as well as a cousin, die of COVID this past May. And it was basically because of their underlying diabetes. And so this is a problem that we were familiar with for years, right? That's why we even ventured into this industry. And so when COVID hit, all of a sudden everyone was alarmed at why the African-American community and people of color were being hit disproportionately at disproportionately more large rates than the general population. And it sort of exposed the underbelly of the health disparity situation in the States that we were fully aware of. And so all of a sudden people were like, okay, that's what you guys have been talking about forever. So it actually, I say it's the best of times and the worst of times, because even though we have this global crisis, people are now willing to hear what we had to say. And after hearing what we had to say, now all of a sudden we're getting distribution in places that we've been trying to get distribution for 7 years. For instance, we just got into Costco. We're on Costco.com, but we're also getting a test pilot. We're in a test pilot program at 40 stores starting January. My business partner went on Fox News and talked about how difficult it was as a Black vendor to get distribution in national retail, and COVID is exactly. And he was talking about COVID, and he was talking about how, the Black Lives Matters movement, if you put it, is highlighting not only disparities in health, but disparities in opportunities and diversity. And we got a call from Target a day later, and 3 days later, we were in 550 Target stores. We got into Whole Foods 3 weeks ago, national. You got national distribution there, and at the end of the call, the buyer said, I won't even lie to you. A big part of the reason we're talking to you is because you're a Black-owned company, and what Black Lives Matter and COVID made her do was start to look at their store. She started to analyze the data in their store, and she realized that Black women, although they aren't the majority of people that go into the store, they actually spend the most out of all individuals who go into Whole Foods. Black women spend the most. And so she was like, it kind of blew her mind that, we don't have many Black-owned vendors in our store, and people spend money, and this is why, right? She started analyzing what they were buying, and so this started happening all over. Trader Joe's called. They had 0 Black-owned vendors in their store, and the president set out a mandate. I want to get some Black-owned vendors in here, and a friend of mine was working there and told me that she heard that she received an email, and I sent an email to the head buyer. I got a call back 2 hours later, and now we're in discussions with them. So I think there's been a lot of opportunity because a lot of people had decided, and it's a good thing, decided to take a look at themselves and to really start listening, and really understand that there is no diversity, not at the levels that we want, that's fair. There's very little diversity. And so that's starting to happen, and that's a good thing. It still needs to be fixed in terms of where the capital is coming from. It's been extremely hard to raise capital. About 1% of all venture capital funds go to Black entrepreneurs. But it's hopefully that's changing as well, because we've been getting some interest there as well. We're currently in discussions.
Mm-hmm. And Kareem, since you mentioned funding, could you tell us a little bit about how you were able to fund NatureAid when you purchased the brand in 2012?
Mm-hmm. So basically what I did is what I believe that all people that graduate from Duke, Fuqua should be doing, which is turn back inward into Duke and Fuqua, right? And so, I had a great conversation. Grant Hill is one of my investors, but he's also one of my best friends since we were in college. And his mom has been my mentor for over 25 years, right? And so she once said to me, she's a trustee, she's on the board of trustees at Duke, but she was on the board of visitors at Fuqua, and for a while she was on both boards. And she said to me, Kareem, I didn't even go to Duke, and Duke is taking everything they can from me, and I'm taking a lot from them. But you actually went to Duke, you spent all this money, and you're not doing anything. Because at the time, I wasn't really volunteering. I wasn't doing anything. She was like, you need to feel as though Duke owes you. You need to plug back into Duke. Why did you even go there? And it was like I had an epiphany. And I said, she's right. And I joined the alumni club out here in LA. And to answer your question, what I ended up doing was raising money from a bunch of Duke University trustees and board of visitors members. So, that first tranche of money came from, a guy named Bruce Karsh, who is a founder and president of Oak Tree Capital, trustee, ran the Duke Endowment for many, many years. The financial aid building is named after him. And that was a cold call. All we had in common was our Duke degrees. He's my biggest investor. And he's written multiple 7-figure checks into the company. John Mack, who was CEO of Morgan Stanley, a guy named Alan Schwartz, who once was CEO of Bear Stearns, now he's executive chairman of Guggenheim Partners. Guy named Ernie Mario, who's the ex-CEO of Glaxo. Some other people like that. But these are all Duke University folks that, you know, most people think they don't have access to, but you actually do have access to, and you have a degree, and that's your invitation, and that's what gives you the green light to just go ahead and sometimes cold call these guys. I mean, what I did as an entrepreneur, and this is maybe what separates me, is the kind of hustle I'm willing to put in. But I just called every trustee on the list and came down to Duke during a trustee meeting and started meeting with people in between their meetings. 5, 10, 15 minutes, you know, dinner, breakfast. I was there for like 3 days, sitting outside in the hallway while they were having a trustee meeting. And, you know, we raised our capital. You know, it took some time after that, but that's how the initial introductions were made. And so, yeah, so I basically, we funded it, no debt, just all private investment from these individuals.
That's amazing. And speaking of hustle, could you talk to us a little bit about how you and Claude were able to be so successful when you launched your first vending machine company out in LA, and what those dynamics were like with the incumbents?
Right. So the vending machine company, you know, our thing was, you know, we were always kind of passionate about this diet-related illnesses and diet-related illnesses. And we moved out to LA, and, you know, we're both from the East Coast. I'm from New York City. He's from the DC area. And, you know, we just thought LA was just like what you see on TV. Like it was Baywatch. Everybody's like people in bikinis walking downtown or something. I don't know. But anyway, that was far from the truth. You know, LA has the same health issues as everywhere else. And immediately we saw like all these overweight kids, and then we read about it, and it was like a 40% child obesity rate out here. And we're like, man, what the hell is going on? And so we just looked at each other literally a week after getting to LA, and we said, what if we put healthy vending machines in the schools? We just came up with the idea, wrote a business plan, you know, went to a local bank, got a small business loan. And the first thing we did was cold call the president of the YMCAs. We just ran up in his office, and we were like, hey, man, you got soda machines in your lobby. You trying to kill these kids or what? You know, and just walked out of there with a contract for all 26 YMCAs. And we were straight up entrepreneurs. Like I was living in the office. We had an office, but I lived in the office, you know, and we eventually bought a renovated U-Haul truck, a 14-foot renovated U-Haul truck, painted all white, although the front of it was still orange. And that was the vehicle. I mean, that was the vehicle for work and social life. I mean, I was showing up at the clubs in Hollywood with a 14-foot renovated U-Haul truck. And then what we did was we decided we need to get these schools. So the first school we went to was Venice High School, which is around the corner, ran the same gameplay. We had the health teacher there with us, and we just went there and said the same thing. And, you know, make a long story short, within a year, we had 7 schools, 26 YMCAs. And what we convinced everyone of was we really weren't a vending machine company. We considered ourselves a change management company, because the fear was you take away sodas and chips and you drop in water and juice and healthy snacks, and then the kids just go across the street and buy it. And that probably could happen. I mean, that's not what happened. And so what we would do is we would have, you know, celebrities. We would, you know, have celebrities come and do celebrity basketball games, and then have them talk to students. You know, just so happened that Mike Ealy from Think Like a Man and a bunch of different movies, he was in barbershop at the time, and he was like hot with the kids. And so he would do these celebrity games and bring his friends, and he'd be like, look, you know, I'm probably the coolest guy that you maybe have ever met. And guess what? I don't eat any of the stuff that you're looking at in those machines. And so the whole thing was we wanted to make it cool to be healthy. And when that didn't work, we had this doctor come in who would do a slideshow, and he would show kids getting their limbs amputated. And being cool and not being maimed were incredible, you know, motivators to be healthy. And so that really worked. And then out here in California, you know, it's like in the valley, it can get up to like 100 degrees. And so our biggest seller was water. And And so that's really how we got the contracts. But then how we marketed was we would have these assemblies. We'd come and talk to the kids. We'd have celebrities come through, and that really worked.
And are you able to share, I know there were some large incumbents already in the vending machines at those schools. Are you able to share sort of how you overcame those large companies that were already there?
Oh yeah. So Coke had maybe, close. They had the vast majority, maybe 100 of the 130 schools, and we took a couple of schools, and we ended up having the vice president of Coke come and threaten us, right? And she was just like, if you guys continue to take schools from us, we're going to destroy your company. And I was like, how you going to do that? She's like, I'm going to unleash the full force of my sales team on all your contracts. We'll just take them. And I mean, look, I speak the King's English, but I was born and raised in the Bronx, and she got that side of me, and that's how we ended that meeting. And we were like, yo, that's not going to happen. And so we called Pepsi, and Pepsi had been trying to recruit me out of Fuqua. And so I knew some people up there. I called them, and they were like, look, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. We'll help you. We'll finance your business. So they sent us vending machines for every school we got. We were like, well, we're only going to sell you healthy stuff, your water, your juices. And then what Pepsi was cool enough to do was they created just for us a certain SKUs of Gatorade that didn't have any artificial color. Because we were like, we like Gatorade for electrolytes. And I know that the sports teams want it, but that artificial color, we're not going to do it. They created it just for us. And so they were doing that. And then we reached out to other companies on the East Coast, like Very Fine Apple Juice. I'm from New York, and that was a company I grew up on. And they created a vending machine program for us. Silk Soy Milk created vending machine program for us. And there was a carbonated juice company called The Switch. So we ended up bringing all these companies in, and they basically financed the operations. We didn't have to pay for vending machines because they was like, Pepsi would just give us 20 machines. And after a while, Coke saw that, and they came back and they're like, hey, we're sorry, we'll do the same thing. Because for them, it's a branding play, right? They make a lot of money. They'll make 300 to 500,000 per school per year, but really they're banking on, if they can get you during your formative years, they have you for life. Like if you prefer Coke over Pepsi when you're 12, when you're 42, you're still drinking Coke over Pepsi. And so that's the play that they were making. So it was really important that they still have a presence. And so we allowed that to happen. But then one day we kind of woke up and we realized we had 7 schools. We were in bed with all these companies. And the lady from Coke already said she's going to destroy our company, but we sleeping with the enemy anyway. We need to outsmart them again. So what we ended up doing was we said, we cold call, we were cold call masters, by the way. We cold called Phil Angelides, who was the state treasurer, and went up and saw him. And we knew he would care about what we were doing because as state treasurer, he was lording over the pension funds. Between CalPERS and CalSTRS, that was about $340 billion. And all of the private equity funds, anyone trying to raise money had to go through California pension funds. But he had this mandate, double bottom line. Like he wants to see you doing something good for society. So we knew he would care. We went up and saw him. He said, man, let me introduce you to these state assemblymen. I love what you guys are doing. And by the way, I'm running for governor against Arnold Schwarzenegger. You guys are so smart. I want you on my finance committee, which we did end up joining. So we get these assemblymen, and we introduced them to this group of health teachers we were working with. We end up lobbying the school board and ended up getting the law change banning junk food in all the public high schools and middle schools in LA. And then eventually that extended to the whole state of California. To right now, between the hours 8 and 4, you can't go into a public high school, middle school in California and buy a soda or junk food. And that was based on what we had done when we literally the first year we got here. That's kind of hustle we were on. The following year, they decided to award all of the schools to one vendor. And we, at that meeting, we approached Coke because they still had the majority of schools, but we had the brand. And Coke was like, nope. This is where it ends. End of the road for you guys to sow, because they knew that it would require like a $9 million, $10 million upfront payment, and we were maybe doing 500,000, 600,000 in sales or something. We approached Pepsi, and Pepsi said, let's do it. So they put up 10 million, and we bid on it, and we won. So within 2 years of being in LA, not only got the law changed, we had every single public high school, middle school in LA, and Coke went from 100 to 0. And so You know, somewhere in Atlanta, I'm sure there's still a picture of us in somebody's office that they throw darts at, if they remember it. But yeah, those were the giants we had to come through in order to get where we were going.
That's amazing. And Kareem, Stephanie Robertson is asking, how often did these cold calls result in rejection, and how did you move past that and still be so successful?
Well, rejection is just part of the game. I mean, I get rejected all the time. I'm constantly trying to raise money. I'm constantly being told no. And that just doesn't change my disposition. Once you win, you realize that you can win, right? If you never win, then you're probably doing the wrong thing in life, if you never win. But if you win, then you're like, all right, I'm capable of winning. And so even though I lose sometimes, I can win. And so I just, and by the way, rejection is not always rejection. Sometimes it's just challenge, right? Because I'll tell you a funny story. Actually, I won't mention the person's name. It's a very wealthy, investor of ours in the Duke family who invested in the company. And I went in his office, and he was actually our first investor. And we were raising, go please, and we were raising what's called as a search fund. At first, we raised a search fund to go find a company. And so this individual said, we were raising $1 million. And he said, we told him what we did in LA. He said, I don't invest in companies, I invest in people. And I like you and Claude, and I want to invest in you guys. He said, I will give you the first 250 if you go and raise another 750. You show me you can do that, I'll be the first to write a check. So it took us like 5 months. We go and do that. And we get it. We get the rest of it raised or committed. We go back to see this guy, right? And this guy, first of all, is like one of the most intimidating Wall Street titans ever, right? He's in the Wall Street Journal all the time. This guy's major. We go see him and we're like, hey, we have the rest. We're ready for you to write the check. And so he says, cool. Do you have like a PPM or something you can show me, some document? And we're like, yeah. Here's the document, right? It's the first time he looks, he's had it for a year. I mean, for 7 months, but so he kind of thumbs through it and he's reading it and he's like, wait a minute, I'm going to pay you guys $100,000 each? Because we were asking for $100,000 in salary while, part of the search fund. He's like, excuse my language, but he's like, I'm going to effing pay you guys $100,000? I'm going to pay, like he starts screaming at us like we're children, right? And so I'm getting angry. I'm like, yo, is this guy serious right now? Just being this disrespectful? But I was a little bit unsure of myself. I said, well, maybe we asked for too much. Maybe I should say we'll take 60. And I'm old. I'm a year older than my business partner who graduated Duke in 95 and I graduated in 94, undergrad. I'm Fuqua 2000. And I said, let me see what he's going to say. So I kind of stepped back and I let him answer. And he looks him in the eye. And he goes, you went to Duke, I went to Duke, Kareem went to Duke. I got my MBA from Wharton, Kareem got his MBA from Duke. Right now, I could go on the street and make $400,000 a year. Well, $100,000 a year, you get me at a discount. I'm not going to take anything less, period. And he just looked at him. And I looked at him, I looked at the guy, and I was just like, and then he looked at Claude, and it was an uncomfortable moment. He looked and he said, all right, let's see what else is here. And that was a valuable lesson because he wasn't saying no. It sounded like no, and he said no. But really what he was doing was he was just challenging us. He was like, you guys are asking for $250,000 right now, but you're gonna come back and you ask for a $3 million check. And I want to know that when you're in the fire and you're the stewards of my $3 million, that you're going to be able to handle some guy just breathing fire at you. And it was a test. And, and everything's good. He did that. He invested in the company. But it was a valuable lesson to me. So all no's aren't no's. Sometimes they're just obstacles that you have to go through to get to a yes. Everybody who's ever said yes to me said no first. There are no. no one but your family members love you enough to say yes to everything. Period.
That's an amazing story. And going back to that concept, you know, you and Claude had your MBAs, you were really educated, you were, you know, worth something. How did both of you find that entrepreneurial fire and decide to not take, you know, a more standard job out of MBA?
Man, this is about to be the silliest thing you're gonna hear all day right now. I'm gonna tell you that right now, but it's my truth, so I'm gonna tell it to you because you're asking me. So I came to Fuqua wanting to be in marketing. You know, I thought that was fun, and I worked at Disney between first year and second year in Orlando, and I was an assistant brand manager of African American and Hispanic markets, and the job was a lot of fun. Like I ended up like creating and just in that summer we had a concert at Pleasure Island with Beyonce and Destiny's Child came through on Wyclef, and we had all these people perform. And I was like, man, this is fun. But they had this book called The Disney Look, and they had pictures of what you could look like and what you couldn't look like. And one of the pictures was basically a picture of me, like you couldn't have facial hair. And at that point I had a goatee for like 6 years, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm a grown man. You're gonna tell me that? And you know, I mean, look, it's not always the case, but a lot of times in the Black community, man, it's just weird to see a Black man with no facial hair. Like maybe on Wall Street they're doing something, so it was weird. I'm from the Bronx. This doesn't happen. You're making a statement when you do that. And so I was like, I have to cut off my facial hair, and I was rebelling against it, right? So I would shave Monday, shave Tuesday, shave Wednesday morning. Thursday I wouldn't shave. Friday I wouldn't shave. And I would get home and I would shape up a little goatee, and it was barely noticeable. But Saturday night it was better, and Sunday be right. And then Monday I had to cut it off. And I was like, man, I just hate that somebody has this much control of my life. Like not only in the office, but my weekends, and I have to look a certain way. I was like, yo, I don't like this feeling. And it really just awakened something in me that was like, I can't work for anybody. I just can't, because I can't. And there's some people that are happy to do this, and I hate doing this. And so that was really it. And so at that point, I came back to Fuqua second year, and I just started focusing on entrepreneurship. Like, what are the skills I need in order to be an entrepreneur? Like, I need to be able to, you know, do my own models. You know, I need to understand operations. I need to understand everything. If I'm at my own business, I don't know what it's going to be, but I need to be prepared for that. And so that was that moment. That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
And you know, in that same vein, what advice would you have for us as first year and second year MBA students if we want to be entrepreneurs?
Well, again, it's about being well-rounded, you know, and just, you have to be able to do everyone's job, or at least be able to check everyone's job, right? And so, you know, you have to be able to understand what's going on in operations. Like you can just entrust it to someone else. But I'll tell you one thing, my investors, they're not asking about my operations manager. They're asking me to answer the questions. You know, we have meetings. So you should understand all areas of the business. And two, there's a certain boldness, I guess I would say, about being an entrepreneur. Like you just have to be courageous, you know, because you're going to be tested, and that inner voice is going to tell you to turn around and go back and get a job before it's too late. You only been out of school 2 years, you can still get a job, you know. And then once you get that job, those golden handcuffs are very pretty. And so you have to decide, you have to just make that commitment, man. You know, a lot of people know Owen May, and he always has this, he has this analogy that's always been funny to me, but his analogy is, you know, being an entrepreneur is like being a general, and you have your ship and you go to an island and you have everybody get off the ship, then you turn around and you blow up the ship. It's like, you're either going to conquer the island or we're going to die on this island trying, but either way, the boat's gone, so we're not going back. And so you almost have to have that kind of mentality in order to withstand the challenges that come with it. Because, you know, you could plan all you want, but it's like Mike Tyson said, plan all you want, but the fight starts when you get punched in the mouth. Then what are you going to do? That's when that plan goes away, and you just better be prepared to deal with what's around the corner. And you never know, you're going to know what that is. So I would definitely talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who've done it. And then, like I said in the beginning, Fuqua is a resource that is just, at this point, it's ridiculous for me to not even, I don't even understand people who don't connect back with the university. You read off the awards I won. That's the highest volunteer award, and it all started with Mrs. Hill telling me that. And the first thing I did, literally, was during the lacrosse scandal. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there's a lacrosse issue, and the Black community was up in arms because, they felt as though, the facts were unclear, and the Black community felt as though the university was protecting the students, and history told that the students were right and they were wrong. But even when the facts came out, there was a little friction between like the Black alumni community and Duke. And so what Duke decided to do was proactively heal that issue. What they did was they ended up doing this Reggie Howard Scholarship fundraiser across the country. And one of the founders of Bain Capital, a guy that said no to me, who's never thrown any money into our deal, but we've been in his office a bunch of times and trying to raise money from him, and he giving us fronts. He also is one of the owners of the Celtics, so we would get courtside seats. He just called me up, was like, "Listen, you guys are always in my office trying to get something from me. Now I need you to do something I need you to do something for me. We're trying to do this with the trustee board of Duke. We're trying to do this Reggie Howard Scholarship Fund. I want you to do it in LA, and I want you to get involved because they're having trouble doing it." And at that time, I wasn't a volunteer. I wasn't involved with Duke. I was involved with Fuqua. Fuqua always treated me differently from graduating. They reached out, and I was connected to Fuqua, less so connected with Duke University, even though I went to Duke University. We did a fundraiser at Bruce Karsh's house, who's a billionaire in Hollywood Hills. And we got Grant Hill to be a keynote speaker, and I got Janet Hill to come out and say a few words too. And we had about 200 Black alumni from the area come in, and this was like a major, and we raised, and Grant said, "You know what, I'll throw in 100,000 if Bruce Karsh throws in 100,000. And then Bruce Karsh was like, "I'll throw in 100,000 if Janet Hill throws in 100,000. So within the first 5 minutes of the fundraiser, we had already raised 300,000, which was like 6 times bigger than every other city. And so at that point, the powers that be at Duke were like, "Who the hell is this Kareem Cook guy out in LA that can do this?" And next thing you know, people were Sterling and everybody was flying out to have lunch with me and like, "Yo, who the hell are you?" But anyway, that was it. And so I just say that to say, get involved. A lot of what happens, a lot of the money I've raised and the rooms I've been in and has all been because of my getting involved and staying involved in the Duke network. The first thing you should do, no matter what city you move to, is join the local alumni club. First thing you should do. And you should always come back, and you should always network. You should always make sure you're in contact. And while you're there, network, because I didn't even know, who a lot of my classmates were until after I graduated. I mean, I knew who they were. I didn't know what they were. There was some really, really connected and powerful folks in my class that I didn't learn about till later. Like one of my friends, I mean, we were really close at Fuqua, but I didn't ask him I knew that his dad owned Range Rover factories in South Africa and Zimbabwe. I knew he did that. But I didn't know that, he was business partners with Nelson Mandela. Like I flew out to South Africa to hang out with him and the Mandela family, you know what I mean? And so, another classmate was like, she was like one of the top women executives at Bank of America in China. I went over there and she like took me, I mean, it was crazy. And so I think that, while you're there, take advantage of your classmates and building real relationships, bonds, and then also plan on being involved and still plugged into the Duke community, because it's really, really important. It can really pay benefits, especially if you're an entrepreneur.
And we're coming up on time here. So the final question I'll ask is from Spencer Goldberg. And he's asking, what are the defining features of your company's culture? And, has the culture evolved alongside the business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say this. So we bought a company called Nature. It's been around since 1926. And, the biggest product was a soy protein meal weight loss shake. And then they sold some gut health products and some other things. And what we liked about it was a household name in a natural channel. So like the 8,800 natural food stores in the country, it was in everyone, in Whole Foods and that kind of thing. It wasn't in the CVS's. So if you didn't go to like Joe's health food store, you wouldn't know the company. But people who are really, really like in the health and wellness, and they are familiar with the company. So we bought the company, and our goal was to introduce products that we could then sell to the communities we were trying to target. But we got to the company, and it was all old white men running the company. But 80% of the consumers were women, were white women. And so I was like, well, how does that work? And we just, Claude and I looked at each other, we were like, our first two hires have to be women, right? And not just women to, some kind of executive assistant, like our CFO, we're just gonna hire a woman, period. Period. We're gonna bring a bunch of people in here, but just know that if you're not a woman, you're not gonna get hired. And we were like, our director of marketing, our top marketing person has to be a woman. We need some women in here. Like, how are these men selling these products to women? And like, no wonder you guys are where you are. And so we added some diversity of some gender diversity, as well as some ethnic diversity in the management of the company. And so, to be honest with you, that upset some of the people who were running the company. I mean, these guys were MAGA hat wearing. If MAGA was around back then, they would have been wearing MAGA hats into the office. Like, these are the guys that were working. We're like, look, I don't really care what your politics are, but here's the culture of the company, and either you can get with that or you can get gone. And so, the current CEO and the current CFO, they bounced on us like within 2 months. They're like, we're not. No. We were like, I want to put a black woman on the website. Like, I just said that, right? They were like, why would we put a black woman? I said, why would we put it, anyway. So those are the kind of arguments I was having for the first year. And those people we either pushed them out or they just knew it was time to leave. And that's important, because if you don't have like a singular culture within your company, you have tribes within your company, you're going to fail. Everyone has to be on the same accord. And we don't ask you to, like I said, I'm not going to ask you who you voted for and that kind of thing. But if you don't understand what we're doing, there are plenty of Republicans that understand that Black Lives Matter, right? And so all I need you to understand is that the health disparities the health disparities are leaning towards, like, are very dangerous for people of color. We're trying to address that. If you're on board to do that, and you're going to work hard and help us get there with these products, we're going to create some products that we're going to sell to those communities, then keep rocking with us. But if not, if you have a problem with that, then bounce. And so that's it took us a couple of years to kind of get that right, because some people still wanted to pretend they just wanted a job, but eventually we got it right. So like right now, our VP of sales, for instance, never mentioned that it was a Black-owned company in any of the sales meetings. Never mentioned the mission. Just went ahead and sold on the value proposition of the actual products, which is how you would sell if you were just, a generic company. But it's important that we're the only Black-owned company in this space. Like, these people, that's important. Every time we go, and we put it this way, I haven't been to a sales meeting where we've lost as a result of me being here. I just started going on these sales meetings like 2 years ago, and I'm, batting 1,000. And it's because people, I think that's mine, because people are they feel our message. It's a universal message. It's not political. You know what I mean? And so it's not partisan. There are plenty of people I know both sides of the aisles that support what we're doing, including the buyers.
And one final question, Kareem, maybe the most important question of the evening from Ariel Powell. How can we keep this momentum going and make sure that companies are continuing to support minority businesses?
That companies are supporting minority businesses? You mean,
so
okay.
For example, Costco distributing your products, or, all of the people in power.
I'm gonna tell you this. It's important that people like us, companies like us, when you get the opportunity, that you're bold in asserting, your truth, right? And so I'll just give you an example. You can figure this out because I gave you enough information to figure out, but I'm gonna tell. I don't want to, record saying this, right? But I'm gonna say it. So we went and saw a CEO of a large retail store, and we had been trying to get in there for 7 years, and they always said no. And the reason they said no was because they don't want to be more than 20% of any one company's revenue in the store, right? And that's because they don't want to be responsible for bankrupting a company, right? Which almost happened to us, right? We were doing, out of 22 million in sales at one point, we were doing 7 million in Sam's Club. And then we got this one buyer who happened to be racist, and he was like, I'm not down with MBEs. And we were like, what? We're not MBE. We've been here. The company was in here 8 years before we even bought it. This is why we didn't want to tell anyone we were black owned. Anyway, they kicked us out. And that actually did get us. So I understand why they do that. But this particular chain, our two competitors are doing 50 million each in there, right? And so in order to be, and so they just didn't want to let us in, right? And so partially due to COVID, but really because we've been working on this account forever. Like, one of the things we did was we cold called the CFO, and I'll just tell you, man. So we cold called the CFO of Costco when we were up in Seattle, and he was like, man, I really like what you guys are doing. He invited us over his house, and we were just, he was like, cool. Like, I really like you guys. I'm gonna try and help you guys get in, but I'm not gonna make anyone do anything. You have to earn your way in, but I'm gonna help you be in a position to earn your way in. So over a year, we were talking to him, and it wasn't really working, right? But then the buyer read an article about us and read about our mission, and she was like, you know what? I like what you guys are doing, man. I'm gonna put you guys on Costco.com because you still can't, we don't want to put you in Costco. We'll put you in Costco in the stores, but we'll put you in Costco.com. And our thing was, man, we got to get in Costco. We got to get in the stores. Like, that's what we want to do. And so it took us a while, but we ended up having a meeting with the CEO and the CFO, as well as Magic Johnson, who's an equity owner in the company, Grant Hill, Claude, my business partner, and myself. And I said to the CEO, he was like, listen, one of the most important initiatives, we want to get some black vendors, some minority vendors in here. We also want some representation on the executive level, some minority board members. And, they want to do all of they're really trying to become more diverse. And I have to applaud their offer. Like Costco is one of the good guys. The problem is they're in their own way. And I told him, I said, listen, I hate to tell you this, and I believe your heart is pure and you really want to do this, but you guys are practicing institutional racism. He was like, well, how's that? And I said, listen, you have this mandate at 20%, companies in our space doing 50 million. How many black-owned companies do you know are doing 250 million in sales that can qualify to get into Costco? None. Zero. You will never find a black-owned company that you can bring into Costco. And it was like an epiphany. He was like, I never really thought about it. I said, yeah, you're the reason you don't have any black-owned companies in here. And so he was like, all right, well, 2 days later, we got the email. We're gonna give you guys 40 stores and see what you can do, right? And so not only that, but that conversation actually morphed into, not only are we gonna give you some test stores, we're also gonna donate all the proceeds of all the profits of products that we sell from your company to inner city schools, inner city education, which Mac Johnson like almost exploded in his chair, and a big bro hug moment. He said, not only that, I want you to help me find some other Black vendors, and I want you to help me find some Black banks that Costco could put their money in. And it just turned to this conversation where, because we were bold enough to say what we had to say to this man, it created more opportunities for others to come behind us. And so, to answer your question, if you get in the door, right? They say in sales, you just want to be inside the door, when the door closes. You knock on someone's door, you want to be inside the house when the door closes, right? You have the duty to not only get inside the house, but to leave the door open for others that are qualified, that are qualified. They don't know they're qualified, but other people are qualified to bring them in the house with you. And that's courage, and that's being bold. And I think that you have to intentionally be bold enough to bring others with you, once you open that door. And so that's what we're trying to do. There are other companies. Yeah, there are other companies. Yeah, there are other companies that are qualified to be there, but he would never know unless someone like us, brought them to him.
That's an amazing story. And Kareem, thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Sanyan to close us out.
Alexis, thank you so much for your wonderful questions, and everyone for joining us. Kareem, this was amazing. My three key takeaways were: one, this idea of being bold to know your truth and what you stand for, and in that boldness, being able to invite others to invest in your success. And then two, part of that going forward is also being bold to also invest in other people's success. This idea of opening the door so others can come and join you. That's how it's not only enough that we make progress for our own companies, but a theme of Cole is that we're all, as leaders, we're all also societal stewards. So we have a responsibility to move everyone forward for the better. And three, this idea of the network. Oh gosh, that is something I am so glad you brought up, because that is a key aspect of success that we don't usually get taught in grade school or high school or college, but it's this idea of your reputation carries with you, and also how you reach out to others and how you engage others. And also, if you really believe, if you are working on something that is truly worthwhile and you believe in it, now why wouldn't you engage others in it? And so I love the networking, the boldness in speaking one's truth, and also the importance of generosity, the responsibility of generosity and stewardship. Thank you so much for your time and your concrete tips and your wisdom. We're lucky to have you as part of the Duke and Fuqua family.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Have a great night, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, everyone.